Nobody screamed. That's the strange part, because when an entire country turns into monsters overnight, you'd expect panic, sirens, people flooding the streets. Instead, Japan died quietly. A woman coughing in a convenience store. A taxi abandoned in the middle of an expressway. A man on the morning train staring straight ahead long after he'd missed his stop. By the time people realized something was wrong, it was already too late. The infected weren't outside the city. They were inside the trains, inside apartment buildings, whispering right beside the people they loved. But this story isn't about a cop, a soldier, or some genius scientist racing to find a cure. It's about Hideo Suzuki, a failed manga artist who still lives off his girlfriend, talks to imaginary people, and carries a shotgun he's never had the courage to fire. And when the apocalypse begins, he doesn't think it's real. Now, because Hideo has spent so much of his life questioning his own mind that even when people start tearing each other apart in front of him, he convinces himself there's a logical explanation until he goes home and finds the person he trusts most standing in the dark, smiling at him like nothing is wrong. What happens next is one of the most disturbing introductions to a zombie outbreak ever put on film. Drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from and what time is it? Let's see how far this video reaches. Hideo Suzuki is not a hero. Not even close. He's a 35-year-old manga assistant living in a cramped Tokyo apartment drawing backgrounds for a manga series that isn't even his own. He's been doing this for years, filling in the small panels, the shadows, the details nobody notices, while the real artist gets the credit. Every morning he wakes up next to his girlfriend, Teko, shuffles to his desk, and picks up a pen that has never once drawn anything the world actually cared about. He had his shot once. His own manga series, I Am a Hero, was submitted to a publisher years ago. It got rejected, and instead of fighting back, instead of redrawing and resubmitting and refusing to quit, Hideo quietly accepted defeat. He filed his dream away like a used receipt and went back to drawing other people's visions. That's who Hideo is when the film opens, a man so deep inside his own mediocrity that he doesn't even realize he's drowning in it. But there's one thing Hideo holds on to, one identity that makes him feel like he matters. He owns a shotgun. In Japan, this is almost unheard of. Firearms ownership is among the strictest in the world, less than 0.3 firearms per 100 compared to over 120 per 100 in the United States. To legally own a shotgun in Japan, you must pass written exams, psychological evaluations, drug tests, background checks, and a rigorous training course. Hideo did all of it. He maintains his license religiously. He carries his shotgun legally in a locked case. To him, it represents discipline, control, the one thing in his life he actually earned. He keeps it unloaded. He keeps the ammunition separate. He follows every rule perfectly. He just doesn't know yet that those rules are about to become completely meaningless. The cracks in Hideo's life begin showing immediately. At work, his editor dismisses him. His manga series, the one he's poured his remaining ambition into, gets canceled without ceremony. When he arrives home devastated, Teko is barely sympathetic. Their relationship is fraying. She's tired of waiting for him to become the man she hoped he'd be. Hideo absorbs everything quietly, nodding, shrinking. He hallucinates sometimes. Brief, vivid episodes where he imagines violent scenarios or hears voices. He doesn't tell anyone. He just keeps drawing, keeps surviving, keeps being nobody. Then one night, Hideo's girlfriend starts acting strange. Not sad strange or distant strange, something else. Her movements become rigid. Her eyes lose focus. She says something to Hideo in a flat, hollow voice, and then bites him hard on the arm, drawing blood. Hideo pulls back in shock, processing what just happened, but Teko doesn't react. She just stares. Then she starts moving again, stiff and jerking, heading toward the door. Hideo tries to stop her. He reaches out, grabs her shoulder, and she turns around with dead eyes and the wrong kind of hunger on her face. He lets her go. He doesn't know what else to do. Hideo Suzuki, the man who spent his whole life not knowing what to do, watches his girlfriend walk out into the Tokyo night, making sounds that don't belong in a human throat. He stands in the doorway of their apartment, rubbing the bite mark on his arm, and tells himself it will be fine. It will not be fine. The next morning, the city begins falling apart in ways that don't make the news fast enough. Strange reports filter through, people behaving erratically, violent incidents with no explanation, emergency services overwhelmed. Hideo steps outside and immediately notices something wrong with the density of the city. Tokyo, which normally pulses with relentless human movement, feels off rhythm. People are standing still who shouldn't be, moving wrong, looking at nothing. He walks past a man on the street who turns toward him slowly, and Hideo sees the eyes, glassy, fixed, the mouth moving without words. He starts walking faster, then running. By the time Hideo reaches the edge of the city, Tokyo is beginning its full collapse, and he is one of the only people with a loaded shotgun, completely unprepared to use it. Where are you watching this from, and what time is it? Drop it in the comments right now. Let's see where the audience is.
Here is what nobody warned them about. The infected in I Am a Hero don't die when you expect them to. They don't shamble in a straight line toward noise. They retain fragments, broken, corrupted fragments of who they used to be. A woman infected near a crosswalk keeps reaching out toward passing cars out of some muscle memory instinct from when she used to hail taxis. A child infected near a school grounds keeps making the motion of writing. The body forgets how to be human, but it doesn't forget what the human used to do. This detail is terrifying in a way that matters scientifically. Real infectious disease researchers call this phenomenon behavioral residue, the idea that deeply ingrained neural pathways can survive neurological damage and continue triggering habitual responses even when higher cognition is gone. The film uses this principle to devastating effect. These aren't mindless monsters, they're something worse. People who have lost their mind but kept their habits. Hideo doesn't have time to process any of this philosophically. He's just trying to survive. He makes his way out of central Tokyo with his shotgun case, moving through streets that are rapidly deteriorating into carnage. He witnesses things he cannot process quickly enough. A salaryman in a perfectly pressed suit tearing at a convenience store window. A group of infected moving in confused formation down a subway entrance. A child's bicycle lying on its side with the wheels still spinning. The city is not exploding. It's dissolving, and the worst part is how fast it's dissolving. On the highway outside the city, Hideo encounters Hiromi Hayakari. She's a teenage girl, young, visibly injured, moving with the kind of forced calm that people develop when panic has already come and gone and left them hollow. She asks Hideo if he has food. He gives her what he has. She tells him almost nothing about herself, and he doesn't push. They travel together the way strangers do in disasters, not because they trust each other, but because being alone in this feels unsurvivable. What neither of them knows yet is that Hiromi has already been bitten. This is the film's most psychologically complex thread. Hiromi was bitten during the early chaos, but she hasn't turned, not fully, not yet. She experiences something in between, moments of clarity and moments where something else seems to be surfacing beneath her expression. She knows what's happening to her. She keeps the secret pressed down deep, the way people do when the truth of their situation is too enormous to say out loud. Hideo and Hiromi reach a shopping mall that has been converted into a makeshift refugee camp. Survivors have gathered inside, locking the doors, barricading the entrances, trying to create the illusion of safety. There are dozens of people there, in various states of shock and resourcefulness. They've gathered food, organized shifts, established a fragile sense of order. It doesn't hold, because what the people inside the mall don't realize, what becomes clear in one of the film's most brutal sequences, is that some of the people already inside are infected, not visibly, not yet. The infection moves at different speeds in different bodies. Some turn within hours, some take longer, but the virus is patient in a way that human vigilance never can be. The mall sequence explodes without warning. One infected person, seemingly stable and cooperative, suddenly attacks the person next to them, then another, then three more. The carefully maintained order shatters in minutes. The barricades become useless because the threat was already inside. Hideo watches it happen, frozen for a long moment, the way he's always been frozen, the way he's been frozen his whole life at the moment he needed to act. But here, on the third floor of a collapsing refugee camp with Hiromi behind him and infected people pouring up the escalator, something shifts. He opens the gun case. Hideo finally fires his shotgun. After years of licensing, years of maintenance, years of treating that weapon with the reverence of a man who never expected to actually use it, he levels it at an infected person coming directly at him and pulls the trigger. The shot connects. The infected person goes down, and Hideo stands there with the recoil still in his arms, staring at what he just did. And the expression on his face is not triumph. It's grief. This is the moment the film distinguishes itself from almost every zombie movie that came before it. The typical genre fantasy is that ordinary people, given weapons and permission, discover their inner warrior. They adapt, they become efficient, they stop flinching. I Am a Hero refuses that fantasy entirely. Hideo doesn't stop flinching. Every single shot costs him something, because he knows, even as these people come at him in configurations that no longer resemble humanity, they were people. They had manga series they dreamed about. They had girlfriends who stopped believing in them. They were somebody's Hideo. He and Hiromi escape the mall and push further from the city, following rumors of a safe zone near the base of Mount Fuji. The journey becomes increasingly desolate. The landscape around Tokyo, ordinarily one of the most densely populated corridors on Earth, is emptying out in a way that feels cosmically wrong. Japan's population density in the greater Tokyo area is approximately 6,000 people per square kilometer. What the film communicates visually and narratively is the horror of that density becoming a weapon. The more people, the faster the spread. The infrastructure built to move millions of people efficiently becomes the infrastructure that moved the infection faster than anyone could contain it. Along the route, Hideo and Hiromi encounter other survivors. Each interaction reveals another layer of what humans do when civilization dissolves. Some people are generous, sharing resources, offering directions, behaving with the same instinctive decency they had before. Others have already begun sliding towards something uglier, hoarding, threatening, treating the apocalypse as permission. Hiromi's condition continues to deteriorate quietly. She doesn't say anything, but Hideo begins to notice, the way her eyes occasionally go still, the way she sometimes pauses mid-sentence as if something is interrupting the signal. He notices and does not confront it. He tells himself it's exhaustion. He tells himself she's just scared. The truth, which is pressing its face against the glass of his awareness, is something he refuses to look at directly. Because Hiromi has become important to him in the specific, powerful way that people become important during disasters, not through history or shared experience, but through proximity to death. She is the only other person left in his immediate world who is still recognizably human. Losing her is not an option his mind will voluntarily consider. Near the outskirts of Fuji, they find a larger survivor group, dozens of people organized around a cluster of vehicles and temporary shelters. Among them is a doctor attempting to triage and identify infected individuals before they turn. The process is imperfect and terrifying. Behavioral observation, temperature checks, watching for the specific stillness in the eyes that precedes the turn. Some people are pulled from the group and separated. Others are allowed to stay. Nobody is certain the method works. The doctor examines Hiromi. He doesn't announce his conclusion publicly, but his eyes, when they find Hideo's, say everything. Hideo already knew it. He just needed someone else to know it with him. The camp is not safe.
No camp is safe. Infected people appear on the perimeter, not one or two, but large groups moving with that horrible combination of purpose and vacancy. The survivors must fight or run. The doctor makes a decision that reveals the kind of pragmatism that emerges when medicine is stripped of its institutional context. He prioritizes who can move, who can fight, who represents survivable odds. Hiromi is not in that category, and Hideo refuses to accept that calculation. He stays with her. He keeps fighting. He puts himself between her and every infected person that comes within range, operating now with a kind of furious, desperate competence that he never found in his actual life. The man who couldn't hold on to his manga career, couldn't hold on to his relationship, couldn't hold on to anything, is now holding the line with both hands around a shotgun in the shadow of Mount Fuji while Japan burns behind him. Let's talk about what's actually happening to Hiromi, because this is where I Am a Hero does something genuinely unusual, something that separates it from standard genre filmmaking and pushes it into more philosophically interesting territory. Hiromi is turning. That is undeniable. The infection has taken root in her body and is progressing through her. She exhibits all the markers, the stillness, the episodes, the biological deterioration, but she isn't gone, not completely. She seems to be suspended in some intermediate state, aware enough to know what she is, but different enough from the fully infected to still communicate, still care, still make choices. She tells Hideo the truth about her bite. The conversation is quiet, almost calm. She doesn't cry and she doesn't apologize. She simply tells him, the way someone tells a doctor about a symptom they've been hiding, because continuing to hide it would require more energy than the truth. Hideo listens without expression. When she finishes, he doesn't recoil. He doesn't step back. He just nods, slowly, and then asks what she needs. This is the most quietly heroic moment in a film filled with action sequences. Not the shotgun, not the survival, the willingness to stay present with someone in a situation that offers no good options. The larger survivor group has made it to the top of an outlet mall near Mount Fuji, a specific, defensible location elevated enough to create choke points. They've gathered supplies, they've established a rotation, but the infected population around them is growing, drawn by sound and movement, pressing against the structure with the mindless patience of a tide. The survivors know they cannot hold indefinitely. They're waiting for rescue, for news, for anything from outside that tells them the government is still functioning, that someone with resources is coming. The broadcast signals they manage to intercept are fragmented and deeply unsettling. Emergency announcements repeat on loops without updates. The suggestion, slowly solidifying into certainty, is that the infection has spread well beyond Tokyo, that this is not a contained event, that whatever coordination was supposed to prevent this failed faster than anyone modeled. Japan's actual emergency infrastructure is extraordinarily sophisticated. The country has spent decades building earthquake response systems, tsunami warning networks, and civil defense protocols after repeated natural disasters. The film exploits the horror of watching that infrastructure prove insufficient, not because it was badly designed, but because the nature of this crisis, a human-to-human infectious agent spreading within a population density that optimization actually made more vulnerable, was a scenario the existing playbooks didn't fully account for. Meanwhile, the infected outside the mall have begun behaving differently, not randomly different, specifically different in a way that raises the threat level dramatically. The full-turn infected, the ones who have completely lost any behavioral residue of their former selves, are beginning to move in ways that suggest some form of rudimentary group behavior. They're not coordinating with intelligence, but they're responding to each other, clustering, inadvertently creating pressure configurations that exploit weaknesses in the survivor's defenses. One section of the barrier breaks. Not catastrophically, not all at once, but enough. Infected pour into the lower level of the mall. The survivors above respond with controlled panic, which is the only kind of panic that doesn't immediately get everyone killed. Hideo is in the middle of it, moving through the space with his shotgun, making decisions in seconds that he has no framework for making. Hiromi, during this sequence, does something remarkable. In her half-turned state, she attacks infected individuals who threaten Hideo. Her body has the strength of someone partially turned, beyond normal human thresholds, but her intention remains directed at protection. She moves through the chaos in a way that is simultaneously horrifying to watch and heartbreaking to understand. She is using what she is becoming to protect the one person she still recognizes. The film lingers on Hideo watching her. The man who spent his whole career drawing other people's heroes is watching something genuinely heroic happen in front of him, and the source of it is the person he was trying to save. He raises his shotgun. He aims it at an infected person directly behind Hiromi. He fires. He doesn't hesitate this time, not because he stopped grieving, but because hesitation, right now, would be the final failure, and Hideo Suzuki is done failing. The final act of I Am a Hero doesn't give you the ending you think you want. There's no helicopter rescue, no government broadcast declaring the infection contained, no moment where the protagonists look at each other across a cleared landscape and understand that the worst is over. The film is too honest for that, and too deeply rooted in what Hideo's story is actually about, which was never really about zombies. It was always about whether a man who has spent his entire life in retreat can find one moment of genuine action, one moment that is completely, purely, irreversibly his. The survivors at the mall have thinned significantly. Some are dead, some have fled, some have turned. The core group that remains is small, exhausted, depleted, operating on the specific adrenaline of people who have accepted that safety is a concept they may not be entitled to anymore. Hideo is among them, and Hiromi is beside him, and the situation pressing against all of them is enormous and without clear resolution. The infected numbers outside have increased to a scale that defies individual response. Hundreds, moving in those quasi-organized pressure waves. The structure that has been protecting the survivors is compromised in ways that cannot be repaired with available materials. The question facing everyone is the one that disaster scenarios always eventually produce. Do you hold, knowing the odds, or do you run, knowing the odds? The final act of I Am a Hero doesn't give you the ending you think you want. There's no helicopter rescue, no government broadcast declaring the infection contained, no moment where the protagonists look at each other across a cleared landscape and understand that the worst is over. The film is too honest for that, and too deeply rooted in what Hideo's story is actually about, which was never really about zombies. It was always about whether a man who has spent his entire life in retreat can find one moment of genuine action, one moment that is completely, purely, irreversibly his. The survivors at the mall have thinned significantly. Some are dead, some have fled, some have turned. The core group that remains is small, exhausted, depleted, operating on the specific adrenaline of people who have accepted that safety is a concept they may not be entitled to anymore. Hideo is among them, and Hiromi is beside him, and the situation pressing against all of them is enormous and without clear resolution. The infected numbers outside have increased to a scale that defies individual response. Hundreds, moving in those quasi-organized pressure waves. The structure that has been protecting the survivors is compromised in ways that cannot be repaired with available materials. The question facing everyone is the one that disaster scenarios always eventually produce. Do you hold, knowing the odds, or do you run, knowing the odds? Hideo looks at Hiromi. She looks back at him with eyes that are increasingly far away. She's moving deeper into whatever the infection makes a person, the gap between who she was and what she's becoming narrowing toward a point of no return. But she's still here. She's still looking at him, and in her expression is something that asks for nothing. No rescue, no miracle, no reversal of biology. Just acknowledgement, just the recognition that she existed and that it mattered. He gives her that. What follows is the sequence the entire film has been building toward. Hideo, alone on a rooftop with his shotgun and his limited ammunition, in a position that is genuinely without exit, choosing to stand and fight anyway. Not because it's strategically sound, not because it will definitely save anyone, but because the alternative is to be the man he has always been, the man who steps back, who accepts defeat, who draws other people's backgrounds. He fires, and fires again. Each shot is measured, each one counts. He's not a soldier, he's not a professional, he's a manga artist who spent a decade maintaining a firearm he wasn't sure he'd ever use, and every hour of that maintenance, every exam he passed, every form he filed, it all collapses into this single sustained act of defense on the roof of a mall in the shadow of Mount Fuji, with Tokyo smoldering somewhere in the distance. The infected keep coming. He keeps shooting. There's a specific beat after the ammunition is gone, after the shotgun is empty and Hideo stands with it as a physical object rather than a weapon, where the film asks a question it doesn't answer cleanly. The question is, does it matter? Does any individual act of resistance matter against a disaster of this scale? Did Hideo's choice to stay and fight actually change the outcome, or did it simply change him? The film leans toward the second answer, and it argues, quietly but firmly, that this is enough. Hiromi's fate is left in the particular way that honest films leave things, not resolved into comfort, not destroyed into despair, but sitting in the ambiguous space where real consequences live. She is somewhere between what she was and what she's becoming. She is still, at the moment the film ends, recognizably herself in ways that matter more than biology. And Hideo, standing in the aftermath with an empty gun and everything lost around him, has the expression of a man who finally did something real. Not a hero in the comic book sense, not invincible, not strategic, not destined. Just a person who chose the moment correctly after a lifetime of choosing wrong. The title of his abandoned manga, I Am a Hero, lands differently by the end. It wasn't the manga that gave him the title. It was this. I Am a Hero was directed by Shinsuke Sato and released in Japan in 2016. The film was adapted from Kengo Hanazawa's manga series of the same name, which ran from 2009 to 2017 and sold over 7 million copies. It remains one of the most praised Japanese zombie films for its commitment to character psychology over genre spectacle, and for its unflinching argument that heroism is not a personality type, it's a decision. The outbreak never gets explained. The government never comes. The world outside doesn't resolve. The film ends with the infection still active, still spreading, still without a framework for stopping it. Because the story was never about whether Japan survived. It was about whether Hideo did. And, in the only way that ultimately matters, in the way that counts the self rather than the scoreboard, he did. He finally, genuinely did. If this breakdown hit the way it was supposed to, the kind of storytelling that doesn't just retell the movie, but makes you feel it differently, then you already know what to do. You're not here by accident. This is the content you've been looking for. Subscribe, and I'll make sure the next one finds you the same way this one did.